All right, we're getting ready to start on another cycle of Rifleman's Reset here, and we're pretty excited about it.
This one's 60 days, so it's basically a 2-month cycle on this one, and we sort of learned from the last one that a touch shorter and then potentially doing an advanced class probably makes the most sense. So we're excited about moving forward on that. And things you're going to get in this are going to be, we're going to have dry fire, right? So there's going to be
Absolutely.
dry fire time. How much dry fire time?
So it's going to equate to about 15 minutes a day, 4 days a week, which, when you see the number, it's going to look like a big number, but really if you just chip away at it 15 minutes a day, 4 days a week, or if you have a vacation come up and you need to add a day for a few weeks to catch up or whatever. So what we wanted to do was make it to where it's easily achievable if you just put in the work. And one thing we saw with the last cycle was the guys that were willing to actually put the dry fire time in perform better.
Yeah. Certainly the feedback was really good for matches and stuff that they've gone to since then, and just general shooting stuff. So the whole idea is basically you kind of get a community, right? So you get a built-in community. So there's a call that happens once a week. We haven't figured out a day yet exactly, but probably sort of Tuesday or Wednesday. Live call with Andy's Q&A. We bring some guests in there. Laurel shows up. Keith Baker shows up sometimes. So we've got the opportunity to get feedback from multiple people across the rifle disciplines.
Yeah, so not only that, but we have the challenges. So we've got, you'll have to complete a couple challenges, and there's a bunch of different options that range from posting on social media regularly to help motivate some of the other guys in the class, to ruck challenges and gym challenges, and reading a couple books off of a reading list. And you only have to complete a couple of them, but we just thought that we're trying to make a well-rounded shooter, and a well-rounded shooter is somebody that tries to improve all the different aspects of their life. And there's hopefully something there for you that you could grab and say, you know what, I'm not doing a real good job of that right now. I want to improve on that.
I know for me, for sure, like I've got my, I've kind of did the ruck challenge piece, and that helped motivate me to actually make sure I was getting some miles in and some time in. And then I think the mental aspect piece, the book piece, right? And that's part of one of the conversations in general is sort of match prep and mentally dealing with that stuff. And what was interesting to me kind of going through the last class was the amount of nuanced things that really seemed to help people that you were able to actually kind of fix live and in person, like not live and in person, but live on the internet, right? On the Zoom call. So like, rifle setup tweaks that you were able to actually kind of make improvements on and help people, make an impact to their wobble zone within literally a few minutes of just, hey, tweak this piece in your setup and, move the buttstock so it lands here, so your scope falls here, so you reduce the wobble when you're having trouble in standing or whatever it was. Like seemed to be a number of those pieces that I think helped and helped me with my setup. Honestly, I changed some things because of that. I think that was really interesting, and it was amazing how quickly that kind of came to fruition and improvements were made, and people were able to see that sort of, within a couple days. And the other nice thing is it's when you look at kind of the classes or the pieces that you're going to work on each week, like each week has a defined sort of here's what we're going to work on, whether that's breaking a trigger or whatever fundamental piece that's going to happen there. The video gets released, say on Sunday, you get a couple days to kind of work on that, see where you're at, and then you kind of have that call so you can have that conversation where you've got questions, and then you can take that back, mess with it, see whether it worked, and then you've got another call that you can follow up if you found anything else that you want help with, and then you sort of lead into the next one. I think that was super helpful to be able to have some time to get some experience, with the concept, and then test the changes, and then go back and ask questions on the changes, and then roll into the next piece. That was I think helpful for everybody. Like that was a big piece of the puzzle for me anyway, and being able to hear the other questions, because I'm not that I asked a lot of questions in that project, but be able to hear all the questions get asked and things that I hadn't thought about or things that people had trouble with. so much better when there's a community involved.
The way the calls are kind of structured is that we will start out with, I'll talk about what we did last week and ask if anybody has any input or any questions from the last week, like what helped you and what questions do you still have. And then we'll go into, okay, once we're done with that, the next third of the call, let's say, is going to be about next week and how you can do that well and what you should expect to see, and here's some things to look out for, that kind of thing. And then we'll just open the last part of the call up to questions. So there will be guys from all over the world that, will ask different questions, and maybe you hadn't thought of it. And like you were saying, I hadn't thought of that, but it brings up good conversation and really helps out.
Well, and the other thing too is, internationally, we had a number of international people in the last one, and certainly you can participate internationally as long as you're abiding by your local regional laws. That's the key to the international part there, I guess.
Yeah. And man, they were motivated, huh? They were up at 2 a.m. in the morning because of the difference in time zone.
To make the calls, yeah. And were even awake, which was crazy. I mean, they stayed awake through the call, which was mind-boggling to me because I had trouble at 7 o'clock.
Yeah. And here they are at 2 a.m.
Yeah, 2 a.m. like with it. No, and I think the community piece is hugely helpful, having that group, and then basically you get access to Mighty Networks, which you get logged into there, so you can ask questions on there through the week as you've got, and you go in there pretty regularly.
Yep.
On a sort of daily, every other day basis, and kind of answer stuff, and the community can kind of help with that, help provide some guidance there too. And you can post video there of stuff that you're working on, you're having trouble with, so that you can either get feedback in the next call or feedback kind of relatively immediately, kind of coaching help. I think that was a pretty handy piece to it. And then there's an Excel sheet that you go into, that you log in, so you get access to your own Excel sheet where you log everything, your dry fire time and how you're doing on your challenges and that sort of thing. And then you can see how everybody else is doing. So if you're a little bit competitive on that, which I'm not, but
there were some people that were.
There were some people that were very serious about competing in the amount of dry fire time that they put in, which was really neat to see, honestly, that they got that into it, and sort of supporting each other in trying to continue. And
all the way up to the end, they said they were going on there and checking to see if has he trained more today, because he might beat me if he has, and and then he would go back and he would dry fire more just to
to make up the time. It was interesting to kind of see that stuff develop, and the relationships that kind of got built in that.
And the key here is we're not just breaking trigger. We're doing drills that are specifically made to make you better. And one of the things you will need is a shot timer. Yeah. So you can either download an app on your phone, but we do recommend getting an actual shot timer because it'll be better for you. But if you're serious about getting better, that's one of the few things you can spend money on that will absolutely make you a better shooter.
And it's not just precision rifle either, right? Like, so, if you're an NRL hunter, if you're shooting team matches, I mean, there was a fair bit of conversation about Mammoth.
Yep.
And your experience with Mammoth and that sort of thing. I think it's not just a PRS relative to discipline. Honestly, at our house, we would have a Monday night watch party. So there would be like 3 of us that were in that sat in and did the live feed project. And, one of them basically is, actually it was 4 of us technically most nights, but, one's a hobbyist myself, right? I just putter. Laurel, who sat in anytime she wasn't at a match. So she was there quite a bit. Again, PRS shooter. And then we've got sort of a new PRS shooter in that group and a 3-position shooter in that group. All that we're in on that class, and we're sort of getting information and putting stuff together. So even discipline wise and where you're at, I don't even think, I don't think that makes a huge difference either.
You just got to be willing to put the work in. That's it.
Yeah. I think there's just a lot of benefit from the information that's given. And then I think having the accountability of the group relative to the training makes a huge difference.
One of the guys, several of them messaged or called me or whatever, and, man, hey, I just shot a match, got the best score I've ever gotten, or hey, I've noticed that my times are dramatically going down on my drills, things like that, where it's, just guys that are really excited because they're finally seeing this incremental increase in their performance. Where, a lot of times you'll hit that plateau and it's like, man, what do I do to get better? I'm going to these matches. I don't see any improvement. I feel like I'm spending all this money on gear and ammo. And if something doesn't get better, I'm not going to keep going.
Yeah, no, it gives you a place. Because I think the thing, and we've talked about this probably at nauseum, but I think the thing that happens is you go and you train and you're working on something and you get to that spot where you don't know what to do to get better, and more training becomes a waste of time because it's not necessarily improving what you're doing, and getting that little bit of guidance hugely improves that efficiency of that time, because it's the time that kills you, right? It's like if you feel like you're wasting time through that whole process, then it's like, well, this is pointless. But if just that little bit of guidance, that little bit of help, or getting some questions answered, or getting here's the next thing to work on, all of a sudden the actual time you're putting in, the production of it ramps way, way up. And I know just personally, like the amount of my wobble went down drastically in positions that I would have trouble with my wobble zone. It's like, thinking about things like it shouldn't necessarily wobble at all, or very minimally. And, places where I sort of would accept an inch, an MOA of wobble or more, and be like, well, it is what it is. And, I think probably my background in shooting a pistol, I just sort of am used to accepting my wobble is my wobble and we're just going to let it rip, and it doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
It's amazing how just literally some small tweaks made an impact to what my wobble was in standing and what my wobble was in a high kneeling and stuff like that, where I fought with it quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we run into, we hear the guys from the last cycle say things like, I'd never had professional instruction before. And I think as guys, as type A guys, we're like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
But,
I'll figure this out.
Yeah. But then is it going to take you 10 years? Because that's what it took me.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Right. Can you reduce that decade of effort into into substantially less time?
I think that's the key is like, man, I'm not here to say that I'm doing anything that you couldn't do, but let me help you take the years off of that cycle.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really the benefit of this is we've done it to a point and we've instructed enough to a point where we really feel like we can bring you a package that takes those years off, to where it's just the frustration and the time are limited to where we can really get you going in a direction you want to go versus having to just sludge through it.
Yeah, just grind. Well, and it's interesting too, you think about, again, people that, sort of showed up, you and Keith and Laurel shows up on some calls, and you've got, Laurel historically is, and I'll speak for her, but historically has been a pretty competitive 3-position shooter, is a pretty competitive PRS shooter, and is trying to figure out NRL at the moment. Not that she has it figured out, but is working at that. And you've, successfully competed in sniper matches and won Mammoth and won the AG Cup and, have had pretty good runs at NRL matches. So, and obviously Baker has been doing this forever in every discipline on the planet. So you kind of end up with access, even with, again, sort of some of the guests that come in, you end up with access to people that have an unbelievable amount of knowledge across a bunch of disciplines that I think is hugely valuable that you just don't get most places.
Right.
Most of the time when you're looking at something, it's like either it's a specific discipline that they're good at, or with this you get a range of information, and the training pieces weekly translate across all, or can translate across all those. And I think that's hugely beneficial to think about.
Absolutely. Well, if you're interested in what this is and being a part of it, you can definitely find out more information on Rifleman's Path. We have Instagram, Facebook, www.youtube. So you can get a bunch of good information there, but if you want it all put into a package, come see us in the Rifleman's Reset in this newest cycle that's getting ready to start here soon.